The frozen winds of Qatar Prime howl mercilessly as Joshua Dixon, a human mercenary, pushes through waist-deep snow. His thermal suit struggles against the bitter cold of this once thriving alien world, now plunged into an artificial ice age. The distant ping of a distress beacon cuts through the storm's fury, guiding Joshua towards his target. With each labored step, Joshua's mind races. The wealthy Qatarian refugees who hired him promised a fortune for recovering their precious artifacts. But as he nears the beacon's source, his suit's sensors detect something unexpected: signs of life. The stasis pod emerges from the snowdrift, its sleek surface coated in frost. Inside, an unconscious Qatarian female lies motionless, her azure skin pale from the cold. Joshua's suit quickly identifies her as Hope, daughter of a prominent Qatarian scientist. The pod's power source flickers weakly, and Hope's body temperature drops dangerously low. Joshua hesitates for a split second. Rescuing Hope could mean a substantial reward, far beyond the value of any artifact. Without wasting another moment, he pries open the pod, lifting Hope's limp form into his arms. Her alien physiology becomes apparent as he holds her close, attempting to share his body heat. As Joshua works to revive Hope, her body instinctively seeks warmth. The intimate contact triggers unexpected physiological responses in both of them. Joshua finds himself acutely aware of Hope's striking beauty, her delicate features a stark contrast to the harsh environment surrounding them. Hope's eyes flutter open, disorientation giving way to fear as she takes in her surroundings. Joshua tries to calm her, explaining the situation in hurried tones. As consciousness fully returns, Hope's expression changes from confusion to determination. "I have the key," she whispers, her voice hoarse from disuse. "The information to reverse the climate change, to save my world. They're hunting me for it." Before Joshua can respond, his ship's AI chimes in his earpiece. Multiple Tarian vessels are approaching rapidly, rival scavengers or enemies of Hope's family, no doubt. The stakes have suddenly risen far beyond a simple salvage mission. Joshua realizes he now faces a choice that could alter the fate of an entire planet and potentially shift the balance of power in the galaxy. As he helps Hope to her feet, their eyes meet. In that moment, an unspoken connection forms between them, transcending the boundaries of their species. With enemies closing in and time running out, Joshua and Hope begin their perilous journey across the frozen wasteland. Each step brings them closer to Joshua's hidden ship and the promise of escape. But as they struggle against the elements and their pursuers, the growing attraction between them adds a new layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. As they push forward, leaving behind the stasis pod and the remnants of Hope's old life, Joshua can't help but wonder, will the warmth of human passion be enough to save this alien maiden and her dying world? The frozen wasteland stretched before them, a stark canvas of white punctuated by the occasional jutting rock formation. Joshua adjusted his grip on Hope, her body surprisingly light in his arms despite the bulky thermal suit. Her azure skin pulsed with a faint glow, barely visible through the protective layers. "We need to move," Joshua said, his voice muffled by the howling wind. "Can you walk?" Hope nodded weakly, and he set her down gently. She swayed for a moment before finding her footing, her eyes scanning the horizon. "There," she pointed, her voice barely audible over the storm. "I remember an outpost in that direction. It might still be operational." Joshua checked his suit's navigation system, confirming Hope's assessment. Without a word, he took her hand, and they began their trudge through the deep snow. Each step was a battle against the elements, the wind threatening to topple them with every gust. As they pushed forward, Hope's strength began to wane. Her steps became sluggish, her breathing labored. Joshua noticed her faltering and pulled her close, sharing what little warmth his suit could provide. "Just a little further," he encouraged, though the outpost was still nowhere in sight. After what felt like hours, a dark shape emerged from the swirling snow. The abandoned Qatarian research outpost stood before them, half buried in ice and drift. Joshua wasted no time, forcing open the frozen door with a grunt of effort. They stumbled inside, the sudden absence of wind leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Hope collapsed against a wall, her body shivering uncontrollably. Joshua's fingers flew over the outpost control panel, coaxing the dormant systems back to life. With a low hum, warmth began to seep into the facility. Hope's shivering gradually subsided as the temperature rose. She looked up at Joshua, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't think I would have made it much further." Joshua nodded, already moving to explore the outpost. In a storage locker, he discovered a cache of Katarian survival gear. He returned to Hope with a thermal suit designed for her species. "This should help," he said, handing her the suit. "I'll give you some privacy to change." As Hope changed, Joshua set up a makeshift security perimeter using the outpost sensors. He frowned at the readings, detecting multiple signals converging on their location. Hope emerged from the adjoining room, her new suit accentuating her alien features. The bioluminescence of her skin created mesmerizing patterns beneath the translucent material. Joshua found himself staring, momentarily captivated by her otherworldly beauty. Hope's voice snapped him back to reality. "I need to access the computer systems," she said urgently. "The data I need might still be here." Joshua gestured towards a bank of terminals. "Do what you need to do. I'll keep watch." As Hope worked, her fingers dancing over the alien interface, Joshua divided his attention between the outpost sensors and the Katarian woman. He couldn't help but notice the grace of her movements, the intensity of her focus. Suddenly, Hope let out a triumphant cry. "I've got it! The data on the terraforming device. With this, we might be able to reverse the damage to Qatar Prime." Her excitement was short-lived. The moment she extracted the data, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Systems began shutting down one by one, the temperature dropping rapidly. "We need to move now," Joshua shouted, grabbing essential supplies. "They're coming, and we're about to lose our shelter." Hope hesitated, clutching the data storage device. "Joshua, I can't transmit this off-world without help. My people need this information." Joshua met her gaze, seeing the weight of an entire world in her eyes. Against his better judgment, he made a decision that could cost him everything. "My ship has a long-range comm array. We can broadcast the data from there." Hope's eyes widened in surprise, but before she could respond, the sound of approaching vehicles cut through the air. Joshua recognized the distinctive whine of Katarian hoversleds. "Time to go," he said, grabbing Hope's hand. They burst out of the outpost into the raging storm. Hope stumbled, her legs still weak from her time in stasis. Without hesitation, Joshua scooped her up, cradling her against his chest. The physical contact sent a jolt through both of them. Hope's skin pulsed with a vibrant glow, her face inches from Joshua's. For a heartbeat, the storm seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of shared warmth. Reality intruded as the lights of the pursuing hover sleds appeared in the distance. Joshua activated a portable shield generator, creating a small area of calm around them. "Hold on tight," he said, setting off at a run. Hope clung to him as they raced across the frozen landscape. The hover sleds grew closer with each passing second, their engines howling like hungry predators. Joshua's ship was still kilometers away, a distant hope in a sea of white. As they pushed forward, the chase intensifying with each step, Joshua couldn't help but marvel at the turn his simple salvage mission had taken. With enemies at their heels, a dying world in the balance, and an unexpected connection growing between them, Joshua and Hope forged ahead into the heart of the storm. The true test of their newfound alliance, and perhaps something more, was only just beginning. The howling wind masked the sound of their pursuers, but Joshua knew they were closing in. His portable shield generator flickered, struggling against the relentless assault of ice and snow. Hope's grip on his arm tightened as she stumbled, her strength waning despite the thermal suit. "We can't outrun them," Joshua shouted over the storm. His eyes scanned the bleak landscape, searching for any advantage. Suddenly, he spotted a narrow fissure in a towering glacier to their right. "There! We need to hide!" Without waiting for a response, he pulled Hope towards the crevasse. They squeezed through the opening just as the whine of hover sleds grew deafeningly loud. Joshua pressed Hope against the icy wall, his body shielding her from view. They held their breath as the vehicles passed overhead, the sound of their engines fading into the distance. "That was close," Hope whispered, her azure skin pulsing with a soft glow that illuminated their tight confines. Joshua nodded, acutely aware of their proximity. "We're not out of danger yet. We need to keep moving." As they ventured deeper into the glacier, the narrow crevasse opened into a vast network of ice caves. Crystalline formations sparkled around them, reflecting Hope's bioluminescence in a dazzling display. Under different circumstances, Joshua might have found it beautiful. Now it only served to remind him of their precarious situation. "These caves might help us lose them," Joshua said, his voice echoing off the icy walls. "But we need to be careful. It's easy to get lost in here." They navigated the twisting passages, the temperature dropping with each step. Joshua noticed Hope's movements becoming sluggish, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "Are you all right?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Hope shook her head, her teeth chattering. "My species, we're not built for this kind of cold. Even with the suit, I'm struggling." Joshua's mind raced, recalling his survival training. "We need to get you warm. There's a technique. It's intimate, but it might be our only option." Hope looked at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Body heat?" Joshua nodded, feeling a mix of apprehension and something else he couldn't quite name. "It's the most efficient way, but only if you're comfortable with it." Hope's glow pulsed brighter for a moment. "I trust you, Joshua, and I don't think we have much choice." They found a small alcove, partially sheltered from the biting wind that howled through the caves. Joshua hesitated for a moment before pulling Hope close, wrapping his arms around her slender frame. Her skin felt cool to the touch, even through the thermal suit. As they huddled together, Hope's glow seemed to synchronize with Joshua's heartbeat. The soft light created a cocoon of warmth around them, a stark contrast to the icy world beyond. "Thank you," Hope murmured, her face pressed against Joshua's chest. "Not just for this, but for everything. You could have left me in that stasis pod." Joshua tightened his embrace. "I couldn't do that. Not to you." The intimacy of their position and the intensity of their shared experiences broke down the barriers between them. Hope began to speak, her voice soft but filled with purpose. "My father, he was the lead scientist on the terraforming project. When it malfunctioned, he knew someone had sabotaged it. He encoded the fix into my DNA, made me the key to saving our world." Joshua listened intently, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. "That's why they're hunting you. You're not just carrying data, you're the data." Hope nodded against his chest. "If we can reach the central terraforming hub, I can reactivate the planet's heating systems. But the saboteurs, they'll do anything to stop us." Joshua found himself sharing his own past, words spilling out before he could stop them. "I lost my family in the Orion conflict, became a mercenary because it was the only way I knew how to survive in this uncaring universe. But this, what we're doing here, it matters." Their eyes met, an unspoken connection forming between them. The moment was shattered by the sound of cracking ice above them. "They've found us," Joshua hissed, pulling Hope to her feet. "We need to move." They plunged deeper into the cave system, the sounds of their pursuers growing louder. The passages became narrower, forcing them to squeeze through tight spaces. Hope's bioluminescence guided their way, casting eerie shadows on the ice walls. Suddenly the ground beneath them gave way. They plummeted into darkness, the world spinning around them. Joshua hit the ground hard, the breath knocked from his lungs. He scrambled to his feet, panic rising as he realized Hope was no longer beside him. "Hope!" he called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. "Hope! Where are you?" A faint glow caught his eye. Hope lay trapped beneath a sheet of fallen ice, her light flickering weakly. Joshua rushed to her side, his heart pounding. Without hesitation, he activated his plasma cutter, carefully slicing through the ice. The heat from the tool sent steam hissing into the air as he worked frantically to free her. "Stay with me, Hope," he urged, finally pulling her from the icy prison. Her skin felt deathly cold, her glow barely visible. Joshua knew he had to act fast. With shaking hands, he began to remove both their thermal suits. "I'm sorry," he whispered as he pressed his bare skin against hers. "It's the only way." As their bodies made contact, something extraordinary happened. Hope's bioluminescence began to pulse in time with Joshua's racing heart. A warmth unlike anything he had ever felt before spread through him, emanating from Hope's alien physiology. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting Joshua's gaze. The intensity of the moment, the shared heat between them, created a palpable tension. Hope's hand reached up, caressing Joshua's face with a gentleness that belied their dire situation. Before either of them could act on the emotions surging through them, the sound of drilling pierced the air. Their pursuers were closing in, boring through the ice above. "We're out of time," Joshua said, reluctantly pulling away from Hope. His eyes scanned the chamber, landing on a fast-flowing underground river. "There. The water might lead us closer to my ship." Hope followed his gaze, her expression a mix of fear and willpower. "The cold, it could kill us both." Joshua took her hand, squeezing it gently. "It's a risk we have to take." "Together?" Hope nodded, her grip tightening. "Together." They stood at the water's edge, the icy current rushing past them. The sound of drilling grew louder, chunks of ice falling from the ceiling. Joshua and Hope exchanged one last look, both understanding the magnitude of what they were about to attempt. With a deep breath, they plunged into the freezing river, the current instantly sweeping them away from their pursuers and into the unknown depths of Tar Prime's frozen underworld. Depths of Tar Prime's frozen underground. The shock of the frigid water hit Joshua like 1,000 needles, stealing his breath and sending waves of pain through his body. Hope's hand tightened around his, her grip the only anchor in the rushing current. Darkness enveloped them as they were swept away from their pursuers, the roar of the underground river drowning out all other sounds. Hope's bioluminescent skin pulsed weakly, providing brief flashes of light in the pitch-black tunnel. Joshua caught glimpses of her face, contorted in a mixture of perseverance and fear. The current tossed them mercilessly, slamming them against ice-coated walls and submerged rocks. Joshua's lungs burned, his muscles screaming for oxygen as he fought to keep his head above water. Hope's alien physiology seemed to fare slightly better, but he could feel her trembling violently against him. Suddenly, the narrow passage opened into a vast cavern. The river's flow slowed, giving them a moment to catch their breath. Joshua's eyes darted around, searching for any sign of safety. His gaze landed on a small ice shelf jutting out from the cavern wall. "There!" he gasped, pulling Hope towards the outcropping. With the last of their strength, they dragged themselves onto the shelf. Joshua collapsed, his body shaking uncontrollably from the cold. Hope lay beside him, her skin's glow dimmed to a faint flicker. "We need to get warm," Joshua managed through chattering teeth. "Our clothes, they're too wet. We have to remove them." Hope nodded weakly, understanding the gravity of their situation. With fumbling fingers, they stripped off their soaked garments. Joshua pulled Hope close, pressing his skin against hers in a desperate attempt to generate heat. The moment their bodies made full contact, something extraordinary happened. Hope's bioluminescence flared to life, pulsing in perfect synchronization with their racing heartbeats. A gentle warmth began to emanate from her alien skin, slowly pushing back the deadly chill that had settled in their bones. As their body temperatures gradually rose, Joshua became aware of their surroundings. The cavern walls were covered in intricate markings, barely visible in the soft glow of Hope's skin. "Hope," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Look at the walls. Are those Katarian glyphs?" Hope's eyes widened as she took in the ancient writings. She pushed herself up, her strength returning as she examined the markings more closely. "This is impossible," she breathed. "These are writings from the first terraformers. We're in a temple, Joshua, a temple dedicated to Tar Prime's original climate control system." Joshua watched as Hope's fingers traced the glyphs, her eyes alight with a mixture of awe and growing excitement. "There's information here about a backup system," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "One that was hidden to prevent misuse. This could be the key to saving my world without relying on my father's device." Before Joshua could respond, a deep rumble shook the cavern. Chunks of ice rained down from above, splashing into the dark water. "They've found us," Joshua growled, scrambling to his feet. He scanned the temple, spotting various artifacts scattered around the chamber. "I'll try to hold them off. You focus on activating that system." Hope nodded, her face set with dedication as she began examining the temple's control mechanisms. Joshua quickly assembled makeshift weapons from the ancient relics, his military training kicking in as he prepared for the impending confrontation. The ceiling cracked with a sound like thunder, and 3 Qatarian mercenaries dropped into the temple. Joshua sprang into action, using his human adaptability and combat experience to his advantage. The cold-weakened Qatarians struggled to match his speed and ferocity. As Joshua grappled with one of the mercenaries, he caught snippets of Hope's voice chanting in her native tongue. Her bioluminescence flared with each successful step of the activation sequence, bathing the temple in pulsating waves of light. "Why are you doing this?" Joshua grunted, dodging a blow from his opponent. "Why destroy your own world?" The mercenary sneered, his voice filled with contempt. "Our employers prefer Qatar Prime as it is. A frozen world keeps them in power, their pockets lined with credits from off-world investors." Joshua's fist connected with the mercenary's jaw, sending him sprawling. "You doom your entire species for a handful of elites?" Before the mercenary could respond, a low hum filled the air. The temple floor began to vibrate, and warmth flooded the chamber. Hope's voice rose to a crescendo as she completed the final steps of the activation sequence. "It's done!" she cried out, her skin glowing brighter than ever. "The backup system is online. Qatar Prime's restoration has begun." As if in response to her words, a hidden doorway slid open in the temple wall, revealing a passage that sloped upwards. Joshua quickly subdued the last mercenary and rushed to Hope's side. "We need to move," he said, taking her hand. "That passage must lead to the surface." They made their way towards the exit, their bodies still pressed close for warmth. As they ascended, Joshua could feel the air growing warmer with each step. Hope's eyes shone with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "It's really happening," she whispered. "We're saving my world." They emerged onto the planet's surface, blinking in the sudden light. The storm that had raged earlier was dissipating, the howling winds reduced to a gentle breeze. In the distance, Joshua spotted a familiar silhouette, his ship miraculously untouched by the mercenaries. As they made their way across the rapidly thawing landscape, Hope explained the intricacies of the planet's restoration process. "It will take time," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "But the change is irreversible now. Qatar Prime will live again." They reached the ship, pausing at the entrance ramp. Joshua turned to Hope, suddenly aware of the depth of the connection that had formed between them. The shared trials, the intimate moments of survival. It all culminated in this moment of triumph and uncertainty. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice soft. Hope's skin pulsed with a gentle glow as she met his gaze. "I don't know," she admitted, "but whatever comes next, I'm glad you're here with me." As Tar Prime began its rebirth around them, Joshua and Hope boarded the ship, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, both for the planet and for their newfound relationship. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them off the thawing ground and into the clearing sky, leaving behind a world in the midst of transformation and carrying them towards an uncertain but promising future. Future. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them off the thawing ground and into the clearing sky, leaving behind a world in the midst of transformation and carrying them towards an uncertain but promising future. As they broke through Qatar Prime's atmosphere, the ship's communication panel lit up with an incoming transmission. Hope rushed to the console, her eyes widening as she recognized the caller. "It's my father," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and relief. Joshua nodded, adjusting their trajectory to maintain a stable orbit as Hope accepted the call. Dr. Callus's face appeared on the screen, his expression a blend of pride and urgency. "Hope, Joshua, you've done it," he began, his words tumbling out rapidly. "The ancient terraforming system is functioning, but we have a problem. It needs more power to complete the planet-wide transformation." Hope leaned closer to the screen, her bioluminescence pulsing with concern. "What do you mean, Father? I thought the backup system was self-sustaining." Dr. Callos shook his head. "It was designed to be, But after millennia of disuse, it's struggling to reach full capacity. There's a solution, though. A hidden Katarian power facility on the nearby moon houses a massive energy core. If we can harness its power, we can jumpstart the process and save Qatar Prime. Joshua's hands tightened on the ship's controls. Just point us in the right direction, Doc. We'll get it done. As Joshua altered course for the moon, Hope's eyes scanned the ship's sensors. Her breath caught in her throat. Joshua, look. Those ships in orbit around the moon, they belong to the Frozen Syndicate. Joshua's heart made as he took in the information. The Frozen Syndicate, a group of Qatarian elites who had been profiting from Qatar Prime's ice age. Of course they would try to stop them. A direct approach is suicide, Joshua muttered, his mind racing through potential strategies. His eyes lit up as an idea formed. But they can't stop what they can't see. Hope, how well do you think your father's genetic key will work on that facility? Hope's skin flickered with understanding. It should grant us full access. Why? Joshua grinned, a spark of excitement in his eyes. Because we're going to use this ship's stealth tech to land on the dark side of that moon. Then we'll sneak in and take that power core right out from under their noses. As they approached the moon, Joshua engaged the ship's stealth systems. The vessels seemed to shimmer before vanishing from sight. They glided silently past the syndicate ships, their hearts pounding with each near miss. Joshua guided the ship to a landing in a deep crater on the moon's dark side. As the engines powered down, he turned to Hope, suddenly aware of how close they were in the cramped cockpit. Her bioluminescent skin emitted a warm, inviting glow that seemed to reach out to him, affecting his physiology in ways he couldn't explain. We should suit up, Hope said softly, her eyes locked with his. They donned their environment suits in silence, the air between them charged with unspoken tension. As they prepared to disembark, Joshua placed a hand on Hope's shoulder. Stay close, he said. We do this together. They stepped out onto the moon's barren surface, the stark landscape stretching out before them. Joshua led the way, his combat instincts on high alert as they made their way towards the power facility. Suddenly, Hope yanked Joshua behind a rocky outcropping. A patrol of syndicate guards rounded a nearby crater, their weapons at the ready. Joshua and Hope exchanged a silent look, both knowing what had to be done. The low-gravity firefight that ensued was unlike anything Joshua had experienced before. He used the moon's reduced gravity to his advantage, leaping impossible distances and using the terrain for cover. Hope proved to be a quick study, mimicking his movements with surprising agility. As the last guard fell, Joshua turned to check on Hope. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the scorch mark on her suit where a plasma bolt had grazed her. "Hope!" he cried out, rushing to her side. "I'm okay," she gasped, but her voice was strained. "But the suit's temperature regulation is failing." Joshua scanned the area, spotting a deep crater nearby. "We need to get you out of the cold. Come on!" They hurried to the crater, ducking inside its shadowy depths. Joshua's mind raced as he assessed the situation. Without hesitation, he began removing the damaged section of Hope's suit. "What are you doing?" Hope asked, her voice wavering. "Trying to save your life," Joshua replied, his fingers working quickly. As he removed the last piece, exposing Hope's bioluminescent skin to the vacuum of space, he held his breath, praying he hadn't just made a terrible mistake. To his amazement, Hope's biology adapted before his eyes. A shimmering, translucent barrier formed over her exposed skin, protecting her from the harsh environment. "Incredible," Joshua breathed, his hand hovering just above the barrier. "Your people are full of surprises." Hope's eyes met his, a new understanding passing between them. The revelation about her physiology seemed to strengthen their bond, reigniting the attraction that had been simmering beneath the surface. "We should keep moving," Hope said softly, though she made no move to pull away from Joshua's touch. With new hope, they pressed on towards the power facility. Using Hope's genetic key, they bypassed the security systems and slipped inside. The interior was a marvel of Qatarian engineering, all sleek lines and pulsing energy conduits. At the heart of the facility, they found the energy core, a massive crystalline structure that throbbed with vibrant blue light. Hope immediately set to work, her fingers dancing over the control panels as she began the process of redirecting the core's energy to Tar Prime. The moment of triumph was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the facility, the harsh sound echoing off the metallic walls. "They've detected us," Joshua growled, moving to barricade the entrance to the core room. "How much longer?" "I need more time," Hope called back, her voice tense with concentration. Joshua could hear the sound of approaching syndicate forces. He knew their chances of escape were dwindling by the second. As he turned back to Hope, he saw the same realization in her eyes. In that moment of crisis, something snapped between them. The attraction that had been building since their first meeting on Tar Prime's icy surface finally broke free. They came together in a passionate embrace, their bodies intertwining as Hope's bioluminescence synchronized with Joshua's racing heartbeat. The kiss was electric, a fusion of human and Katarian that defied the logic of their different biologies. For a brief moment, the danger around them faded away, leaving only the connection between them. The sound of the power transfer, completing, snapped them back to reality. Hope's eyes widened as she looked at the core's readouts. "It's done," she breathed. "Tar Prime will live again." The door to the core room buckled under the Syndicate's assault. Joshua's mind raced, searching for a way out. His eyes landed on the facility's power distribution panel, and a dangerous plan formed. "Hope, we need to go. Now!" He grabbed her hand, pulling her towards a maintenance shaft he'd spotted earlier. With his free hand, he overloaded the facility's systems, causing a chain reaction of explosions. They raced through the maintenance shaft as the facility began to crumble around them. Emerging onto the moon's surface, they sprinted for Joshua's ship, the sounds of pursuit close behind. As they lifted off from the moon, they witnessed a spectacular sight. The energy core's power beamed towards Tar Prime in a dazzling display of light. The planet's ice caps began to melt rapidly, revealing the long-hidden splendor of Katarian cities. Their moment of victory was short-lived. The ship's sensors blared a warning. Syndicate vessels were moving to intercept them. "Hold on," Joshua growled, pushing his ship to its limits. He wove through the debris field left by the destroyed moon base, using every trick he'd learned in his years as a mercenary. Hope's voice cut through the tension. "Joshua, I have an idea. The newly exposed mountain range on Tar Prime, there's a hidden hangar there. If we can reach it, we might lose them." Joshua nodded, trusting Hope's knowledge of her homeworld. He pushed the engines harder, dropping into Tar Prime's atmosphere at a dangerous angle. The ship shuddered and groaned under the stress, but held together. Guided by Hope's directions, Joshua threaded the ship through a narrow pass in the mountain range. Ahead, a section of the mountainside shimmered and disappeared, revealing the entrance to an ancient hangar. They landed hard, the ship's systems failing one by one as they skidded to a stop. Smoke filled the cockpit as Joshua and Hope stumbled out, coughing and gasping for air. As the smoke cleared, they found themselves standing at the entrance of a vast, hidden Katarian city. The architecture was unlike anything Joshua had ever seen, a blend of organic shapes and crystalline structures that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Hope's eyes were wide with wonder. This city, it must have been preserved beneath the ice for centuries. Joshua nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of their discovery. The Syndicate would be searching for them, and they were stranded in this ancient city with a damaged ship and limited resources. As they stood there on the precipice of this new adventure, Joshua felt Hope's hand slip into his. Her skin pulsed with a gentle glow, a reminder of the intimate moment they had shared in the power facility. "What do we do now?" Hope asked, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Joshua squeezed her hand, his eyes scanning the hidden city before them. "We explore, we survive, and we find a way to protect your world from the Syndicate, together." With that, they stepped forward into the unknown, the future of Tar Prime hanging in the balance, and the deepening connection between them promising to be both their greatest strength and their most thrilling challenge. As Joshua and Hope stepped into the hidden Katarian city, their hands remained intertwined, a physical reminder of the connection they'd forged. The air around them hummed with ancient energy, and Hope's bioluminescent skin cast a soft, ethereal glow on the crystalline structures surrounding them. "This is incredible," Joshua breathed, his eyes wide as he took in the organic shapes and pulsing lights of the preserved city. "I've never seen anything like it." Hope nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and trepidation. "It's like stepping into a piece of my people's history, but we need to be careful. We don't know what else might have survived down here." They moved deeper into the city, their footsteps echoing in the cavernous spaces. Hope's skin flickered with each new discovery, her bioluminescence reacting to her heightened emotions. As they ventured further, the structures gave way to a network of tunnels, descending into the planet's depths. Joshua's combat instincts kicked in as they entered the narrow passages. "Stay close," he whispered to Hope. "These tunnels could be a maze." Hope's glow intensified, providing much-needed illumination in the darkness. "My people were known for their complex underground systems," she explained. "They were designed to protect us from harsh surface conditions." As they navigated the winding corridors, Joshua couldn't help but notice the way Hope's light danced across the walls, creating mesmerizing patterns. The intimacy of their shared experience in the power facility lingered between them, an unspoken current that seemed to grow stronger with each step. After what felt like hours of exploration, they emerged into a vast chamber. At its center stood a towering computer system, its surfaces covered in intricate Tarian glyphs. Despite centuries of dormancy, soft lights pulsed along its circuits, indicating it was still operational. Hope approached the system, her eyes wide with recognition. "This is it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "The central database of our ancestors. It might hold the key to saving a Qatar Prime." As Hope began to interface with the computer, her genetic signature granting her access, Joshua took up a defensive position near the chamber's entrance. "I'll keep watch," he said. "We don't know if the Syndicate has found a way down here." While Hope delved deeper into the ancient data, Joshua scouted the surrounding area. He moved silently through the adjoining tunnels, his senses alert for any sign of danger. In a nearby passage, he found fresh scuff marks on the floor and a discarded ration pack. His heart rate spiked. They weren't alone. Hurrying back to the central chamber, Joshua found Hope standing motionless before the computer, her skin pulsing with an intense, erratic light. "Hope?" he called out, concern evident in his voice. She turned to him, her eyes wide with shock. "Joshua," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I've found something. Something that changes everything." Before she could elaborate, the ground beneath their feet shuddered violently. Dust and small debris rained down from the ceiling as the tremors intensified. "What's happening?" Joshua shouted over the rumbling. Hope's fingers flew over the computer's interface. "The climate change we triggered. It's destabilizing the planet's crust. These quakes, they're just the beginning." As if to punctuate her words, a large crack appeared in the chamber's floor, spreading rapidly towards the computer system. Hope quickly downloaded the crucial data onto a portable device before the ground gave way beneath the ancient machine, sending it crashing into the growing chasm. "We need to get out of here," Joshua urged, grabbing Hope's hand and pulling her towards the exit. They raced through the collapsing tunnels, dodging falling debris and leaping over widening fissures. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a group of armed Qatarians. At their head stood a tall, imposing figure whose features bore a striking resemblance to Hope's. "Hope," the leader said, his voice cold and commanding. "I see you've been busy." Hope's grip on Joshua's hand tightened. "Uncle Zarek," she replied, her voice tinged with a mix of surprise and disdain. "I should have known the Syndicate would send you." Zarek's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. "Hand over the data, niece, for the good of Qatar Prime." Hope's skin flared defiantly. "Never! You'll only use it to maintain your power. Our people deserve the truth." As tensions escalated, the ground shook again, more violently than before. In the chaos that ensued, Joshua reacted instinctively. He pulled Hope behind a fallen column as Zarek's men opened fire, their energy weapons illuminating the crumbling passageway. The firefight was intense and chaotic. Joshua's combat experience and Hope's knowledge of Qatarian physiology gave them an edge, but they were grossly outnumbered. They fought their way through the narrow corridors, using the unstable environment to their advantage. Hope's bioluminescence flared erratically with each near miss, creating a disorienting light show that confused their pursuers. As they ran, she gasped out the truth she'd discovered. The Ice Age. It wasn't an accident. Our ancestors caused it intentionally to save us from a cosmic disaster. Joshua ducked as a blast of energy sizzled past his ear. What kind of disaster? I don't know exactly, Hope replied, her breath coming in ragged gasps. But the computer had plans for a planetary shield. If we can activate it... Her words were cut short as a massive tremor shook the entire complex. The floor beneath them gave way, and they found themselves sliding down a steep incline. They landed hard in a large domed chamber, water already ankle-deep and rising fast. As they struggled to their feet, Hope's light revealed sealed doors on all sides. The water was pouring in through rapidly widening cracks in the walls and floor. "There!" Joshua shouted, pointing to a small air pocket near the domed ceiling. "It might be our only chance." They waded through the rising water, which was now at their waists. As they reached the spot Joshua had indicated, they realized with sinking hearts that the pocket was barely large enough for one person. Joshua made a split-second decision. "You take it," he said, his voice firm. "Your people need you." Hope's eyes widened in protest, but before she could argue, a realization dawned on her. Her skin began to glow more intensely, and she pulled Joshua close. "Do you trust me?" she asked, her eyes locked with his. Without hesitation, Joshua nodded. "With my life." Hope's arms wrapped around him, her body pressing against his, as her bioluminescent skin began to envelop them both. As the water reached their necks, a translucent cocoon formed around them, creating a protective barrier. They sank beneath the surface, clinging to each other as the chamber filled completely. In the eerie, glowing silence of their underwater embrace, Hope and Joshua found themselves facing an uncertain future, their fates now more intertwined than ever. As they floated in the darkness, surrounded by the ruins of Hope's ancestral city, the gravity of their situation strengthened their already powerful bond. Hope's barrier provided them with a limited air supply and protection from the cold, but they both knew it couldn't last forever. Joshua's mind raced, searching for a way out of their watery prison. He knew they had to escape, not just for their own survival, but for the future of Qatar Prime. The data Hope carried and the knowledge of the planetary shield could be the key to saving her world. As they drifted in their luminescent cocoon, the challenge that lay ahead was clear. They needed to find a way out of the flooded city, evade the syndicate forces, and begin their quest to activate the planetary shield. The fate of an entire world rested in their hands, and time was running out. The fate of an entire world rested in their hands, and time was running short. As the water continued to rise, Hope's bioluminescent barrier enveloped them both, providing a thin shell of protection against the frigid liquid. Joshua could feel the warmth of Hope's body pressed against his, their hearts beating in tandem as they clung to each other in the darkness. "We need to find a way out," Joshua said, his voice muffled by the cocoon of light surrounding them. Hope nodded, her eyes scanning the submerged chamber. "The barrier won't last forever. We have to move." Suddenly, a violent tremor shook the chamber, sending vibrations through the water. A section of the wall collapsed, debris tumbling through the murky depths. As the silt settled, Hope's glow revealed a narrow opening where the wall had given way. "There," Joshua pointed. "That might be our ticket out of here." Without hesitation, they swam towards the gap, Hope's bioluminescence lighting their way. The passage was tight, forcing them to press even closer together as they maneuvered through. Joshua could feel every curve of Hope's body against his, their intimate contact intensifying the connection between them. They navigated a series of flooded tunnels, twisting and turning through the ancient Qatarian infrastructure. Hope's light flickered and pulsed, casting eerie shadows on the submerged walls. Joshua's lungs burned as they pushed onwards, the protective barrier providing just enough oxygen to keep them going. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a partially submerged cavern. They broke the surface, gasping for air, their bodies still intertwined. Hope's barrier dissipated as they treaded water, scanning their surroundings. "Look," Hope said, her voice filled with wonder. She pointed to a dark shape beneath the water's surface. They dove down together, Hope's bioluminescence revealing an ancient Qatarian submersible vehicle hidden in the depths of the cavern. Its sleek, organic design spoke of a level of technology long lost to Hope's people. They surfaced again, exchanging a look of excitement. "Can you operate it?" Joshua asked. Hope nodded. "I think so. It should respond to my genetic signature." They swam to the submersible, and Hope placed her hand on a smooth panel near what appeared to be the entry hatch. The vehicle hummed to life, lights flickering on along its hull. The hatch opened with a soft hiss, revealing a cramped interior barely large enough for two. As they climbed inside, Joshua couldn't help but notice how close they had to sit, their bodies pressed together in the confined space. Hope's skin glowed softly in the dim light of the submersible's controls, highlighting the curves of her face and the determined set of her jaw. "Hold on," Hope said as she activated the submersible's systems. The vehicle came to life, humming softly as it began to move through the water. They navigated through a network of underwater caves, Hope's innate understanding of Qatarian technology guiding their path. Joshua kept his eyes on the external sensors, watching for any sign of syndicate forces. "We're approaching the surface," Hope announced after some time, "but I'm detecting a blockade above us." Joshua studied the sensor readings. "The planet's changing landscape might work to our advantage. See those thermal readings? It looks like a field of underwater geysers has formed nearby." Hope's eyes lit up with understanding. "If we time it right, we could use one of the eruptions as cover." They piloted the submersible towards the geyser field, tension mounting as they drew closer to the surface. Joshua counted down the seconds between eruptions, his hand resting on Hope's arm. "Now!" he shouted. Hope fired the submersible's propulsion system at full power, timing their ascent perfectly with a massive geyser eruption. They burst through the surface in a spray of superheated water and steam, momentarily hidden from the syndicate ships patrolling above. As the mist cleared, they found themselves in a transformed landscape. Vast stretches of ancient Qatarian ruins, long hidden beneath the ice, now stood exposed to the open air. In the distance, a structure unlike the others caught their attention. "That's it," Hope breathed, "one of the control points for the planetary shield." But their elation was short-lived. Syndicate ships were already converging on the location, their engines roaring as they descended from the sky. "We need to move," Joshua said urgently. "Can we make it to shore before they spot us?" Hope nodded, guiding the submersible towards a rocky outcropping. They abandoned the vehicle as soon as they reached land, scrambling up the thawing terrain. The ground was treacherous, alternating between slick ice and muddy, unstable earth. As they crested a hill, a plasma bolt sizzled past them, scorching the ground where they had just stood. A group of Tarian rebels, their skin glowing with various hues, emerged from behind a crumbling wall. "This way!" a female Qatarian shouted, her voice filled with authority. "We'll cover you!" Joshua and Hope sprinted towards the rebels as energy weapons fire erupted around them. They dove behind the ruined wall, breathing heavily. The rebel leader turned to them, her eyes widening as she looked at Hope. "You're Dr. Callus's daughter," she said, recognition in her voice. "I'm Cora. We've been waiting for you." Hope nodded, surprise evident on her face. "How did you know?" "We intercepted syndicate communications," Cora explained quickly. "We know you have information that could save our world. We're here to help you reach the control point." A nearby explosion rocked the ground, sending debris flying. Cora gestured for them to follow. "We need to move. The syndicate is closing in, and this area is becoming more unstable by the minute." As they ran through the ruins, Cora filled them in on the current situation. The rapid thawing had thrown Tar Prime into chaos, with various factions vying for control. The syndicate's grip on power was weakening, but that only made them more desperate and dangerous. They reached the outskirts of the ancient city housing the control point. Syndicate forces had already established a perimeter, their energy weapons trained on the approaches. Cora turned to Joshua and Hope. "We can create a diversion, draw their fire away from the main entrance. It should give you two a chance to slip inside." Joshua nodded, his mind already formulating a plan. "We'll need to move fast and stay low. Hope, are you ready?" Hope's skin pulsed with drive. "Let's do this." As the rebels engaged the syndicate forces in a fierce firefight, Joshua and Hope slipped away, using the chaos as cover. They darted from one crumbling structure to another, Hope's bioluminescence dimmed to avoid detection. The ground shook beneath their feet as they approached the central building, aftershocks from the planetary changes making their progress treacherous. Hope's glow provided just enough light to navigate the deteriorating structures. They reached the main entrance only to find it sealed shut. Hope ran her hands over the ancient markings surrounding the door. "There's a secondary access point," she said, "but it requires two people to activate simultaneously." They found the access panels on either side of the door. As they positioned themselves to activate them, a violent tremor rocked the building. The floor beneath Joshua's feet gave way, and he found himself dangling over a deep chasm, clinging to the edge with one hand. "Joshua!" Hope cried out, grabbing his arm. She strained to pull him up, her muscles trembling with the effort. Her bioluminescence flared intensely, bathing the area in blinding light. With a surge of strength, Hope hauled Joshua to safety. They collapsed together on the floor, their bodies pressed close, hearts pounding in unison. As they caught their breath, they realized that Hope's bioluminescent flare had triggered the door mechanism. The entrance slid open with a low rumble, revealing a chamber filled with dormant Qatarian technology. They stepped inside, the sounds of battle still echoing from outside. Before them stood the control panel, its surface covered in intricate Tarian symbols. Hope approached it, her hand hovering over the controls as she deciphered the ancient language. Joshua took up a defensive position near the door, his eyes scanning for any sign of syndicate forces. "Whatever you need to do, Hope, do it fast. I don't think we have much time." Hope nodded, her fingers dancing over the panel as she began the activation sequence. The fate of Qatar Prime hung in the balance as they raced against time, the chaos of battle drawing ever closer to their sanctuary of ancient technology. The ancient symbols glowed faintly as Hope's fingers danced across the control panel, initiating the activation sequence for the planetary shield. "It's working," Hope breathed, her eyes wide with excitement. "The first stage is—" Her words were cut short as a violent tremor shook the chamber. The floor beneath them buckled, and a deafening crack echoed through the air. Joshua's instincts kicked in immediately. He lunged forward, wrapping his arms around Hope and pulling her away from the control panel just as a massive chunk of the ceiling came crashing down. They tumbled to the ground, Joshua's body shielding Hope from the falling debris. Dust filled the air, making it difficult to breathe. As the shaking subsided, Joshua lifted his head, his face mere inches from Hope's. Her bioluminescence pulsed rapidly, casting an ethereal glow in the dim chamber. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the dust. Hope nodded, her eyes locked on his. "Thanks to you." They disentangled themselves and surveyed the damage. The control panel hummed with energy, seemingly unaffected by the quake. Hope rushed back to it, her fingers flying over the symbols. "The shield's first stage is active, but—" She frowned, her bioluminescence flickering with concern. "The environmental instability is increasing at an alarming rate. We need to activate 2 more control points to complete the shield." Joshua joined her at the panel, studying the data scrolling across its surface. "How long do we have?" Hope's expression grew grim. "Not long. The rapid climate change is causing more frequent and intense earthquakes. If we don't stabilize the planet soon—" A chirping sound interrupted them. Joshua pulled out a communication device given to them by the rebels. Cora's voice crackled through the speaker. "Joshua, Hope, can you hear me? The Syndicate has breached the city's defenses. You need to get out of there now." Joshua met Hope's gaze, seeing his own persistence reflected in her eyes. "We need to find the other control points. Fast." Hope nodded, her attention returning to the panel. Her fingers flew across the symbols, and suddenly, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden passageway. "An emergency exit," Hope explained. "It leads to an underground transport system." They hurried into the passageway, the door sliding shut behind them, just as the sounds of approaching Syndicate troops echoed through the chamber. The tunnel was dark, illuminated only by Hope's bioluminescence. They ran hand in hand, their footsteps echoing off the ancient walls. The passage opened into a vast underground station. Before them stood a sleek, organic-looking vehicle, an ancient maglev train. Hope approached a control panel near the train, and it hummed to life, responding to her genetic signature. "It still works," she said, a note of awe in her voice. They climbed aboard, the train's interior barely large enough for two. As Hope interfaced with the navigation system, the station behind them erupted with activity. Syndicate troops, led by a tall, imposing Tarian, burst into view. "Hope!" the leader called out, his voice filled with rage and desperation. "Stop this madness now!" Hope's eyes widened in recognition. "Uncle Zarek," she whispered. Before Zarek could say more, the train surged forward. Plasma bolts sizzled past them as the Syndicate opened fire, but the train was already accelerating into the darkness of the tunnel. Joshua and Hope found themselves pressed together in the small compartment, the train's rapid acceleration pinning them to their seats. Hope's bioluminescence responded to their proximity, bathing the interior in a soothing, pulsating glow. As the adrenaline of their escape began to subside, Hope turned to the navigation console. "I can interface with the train's systems," she said, her fingers dancing over the controls. "It looks like these tunnels can take us close to the second control point." Joshua nodded, studying the tunnel rushing past them. "Any idea what we'll find down here?" Hope shook her head. "These areas have been unexplored for centuries. The records I accessed didn't have much information about them." As if to emphasize her point, a violent tremor shook the train. Cracks appeared in the tunnel walls and chunks of rock began to fall around them. "The environmental changes," Hope gasped. "They're affecting the tunnels." Joshua's pilot instincts took over. He pushed past Hope, taking control of the train's manual override. "I'll have to navigate us through," he said, his voice tense with concentration. "Can you interpret the Katarian signs? We need to know if there are any warnings or alternate routes." Hope nodded, her eyes scanning the blurred symbols flashing by. "Left tunnel!" she shouted as a fork approached. Joshua veered the train sharply, narrowly avoiding a cave-in. They raced through the unstable tunnels, Hope calling out directions as Joshua maneuvered the ancient vehicle with expert precision. The close quarters and high-stakes situation heightened their awareness of each other. Every brush of their bodies, every shared breath, seemed magnified. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into an enormous cavern. The train screeched to a halt on a platform overlooking a vast, glowing complex. "It's a geothermal power plant," Hope breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "Another relic of our ancient civilization." As they disembarked, the ground beneath them trembled continuously. Hope accessed a nearby terminal, her bioluminescence pulsing rapidly as she absorbed the information. "This plant," she said, turning to Joshua with urgency in her voice. "It's crucial for maintaining the planetary shield once it's activated, but it's dangerously unstable after centuries of neglect. We need to repair it before we can proceed to the second control point." Joshua surveyed the complex network of catwalks and machinery stretching out before them. "Then we'd better get to work," he said, his voice filled with dedication. "Show me what needs to be done." Together they set off into the heart of the ancient power plant, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest to save Qatar Prime. Hope and Joshua raced through the ancient geothermal plant, repairing critical systems as they went. The constant tremors beneath their feet served as a grim reminder of the planet's rapidly deteriorating condition. "That should do it," Hope said, wiping sweat from her brow as she finished recalibrating the last power conduit. "The plant's stable enough to support the shield once it's activated." Joshua nodded, his eyes scanning the complex machinery around them. "We need to move. The second control point is our next target." They made their way back to the maglev train, Hope's bioluminescence guiding them through the dimly lit corridors. As they boarded the vehicle, another violent quake shook the cavern, causing rocks to rain down around them. "Hold on!" Joshua shouted, engaging the train systems. The ancient transport lurched forward, accelerating rapidly as they sped away from the collapsing tunnel behind them. Hope interfaced with the navigation system, her fingers dancing across the controls. "The tunnels lead to a surface exit near the second control point," she said, her voice tense with concentration. "But the instability is getting worse. We might not make it all the way." As if to confirm her words, a massive tremor rocked the train, nearly throwing them from their seats. Warning lights flashed across the console as the tunnel ahead began to collapse. "We need to find another way out," Joshua said, his pilot instincts kicking in. He spotted a maintenance hatch in the ceiling of the train. "Up there! It might lead to the surface." With the tunnel crumbling around them, Joshua and Hope clambered through the hatch, emerging on top of the speeding train. The wind whipped past them as they clung to the smooth surface, the cavern walls a blur of rock and ancient metal. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast cavern. Joshua's eyes widened as he saw daylight streaming in through a massive crack in the ceiling. "There's our way out," he shouted over the roar of the train. Hope nodded, her skin pulsing with nervous energy. "We'll have to jump." As the train hurtled towards the far wall of the cavern, Joshua and Hope positioned themselves at the edge of the roof. With a shared look of purpose, they leaped into the air, just as the train crashed into the cavern wall in a spectacular explosion of metal and stone. They plummeted through the air, the ground rushing up to meet them. At the last moment, Hope's bioluminescence flared intensely, creating a cushion of energy that slowed their descent. They landed hard but safely on a rocky outcropping near the surface breach. Catching their breath, they surveyed their surroundings. The landscape before them was alien and treacherous, a newly formed swampland created by the melting ice caps, dotted with half-submerged Qatarian ruins. "We need to find a way to the second control point," Hope said, scanning the horizon. Joshua nodded, pulling out a portable scanner salvaged from the rebel base. "I'm picking up some unusual energy readings to the north. It could be what we're looking for." As they began to move, a distant rumble caught their attention. Looking up, they saw a sleek Qatarian aircraft cutting through the turbulent sky, heading in their direction. "Syndicate," Joshua growled. "We need to move fast and find cover." They set off across the treacherous terrain, the warm, geothermally heated swamp water sloshing around their legs. Hope's bioluminescence reacted to the mineral-rich liquid, causing her skin to glow more intensely than ever before. As they pushed through the swamp, Joshua noticed the glow attracting small, bioluminescent organisms in the water. They swirled around Hope, creating a mesmerizing light show that both beautiful and dangerous. It would make them easy to spot from the air. "We need to find a way to dampen your glow," Joshua said, concern evident in his voice. Hope nodded, concentrating on controlling her bioluminescence. "I'll try, but this environment is affecting me in ways I don't fully understand." They pressed on, using the partial map they had salvaged to navigate the unfamiliar landscape. The Syndicate aircraft grew closer, its engines a constant reminder of the danger at their backs. Suddenly, the ground beneath them gave way. Joshua and Hope found themselves plunging into warm, murky water. As they surfaced, sputtering and gasping for air, they realized their communication devices and navigation equipment had been damaged in the fall. "We're cut off," Hope said, her voice tinged with frustration. "No way to contact the rebels or pinpoint the exact location of the control point." Joshua scanned the area, his eyes settling on a cluster of half-submerged ruins in the distance. "Those structures might provide some cover and a vantage point. Let's head there and regroup." As they swam towards the ruins, Hope's physiological responses to the environment intensified. The warm, mineral-rich water seemed to be triggering unexpected changes in her biology. Her skin began to emit a subtle, pheromone-like substance that Joshua found increasingly difficult to ignore. They reached the ruins, pulling themselves onto a partially collapsed platform. As Joshua helped Hope up, their hands lingered together longer than necessary, a spark of electricity passing between them. "We need to keep moving," Joshua said, his voice husky. "The Syndicate won't be far behind." Hope nodded, her eyes locked on his. "Yes, we should." Her words were cut short by the sound of engines overhead. The Syndicate aircraft had found them. As plasma bolts began to rain down around them, Joshua grabbed Hope's hand, and they plunged back into the swamp, seeking shelter in the labyrinth of ruined structures. Their hearts pounded as they navigated the treacherous underwater passages, Hope's bioluminescence providing their only source of light. The pheromone-like substance continued to affect Joshua, sharpening his senses and intensifying his awareness of Hope's presence. As they emerged in a partially flooded chamber, They found themselves face to face with an ancient Qatarian outpost, its systems humming with dormant energy. Hope's eyes widened in recognition. "This could be our chance," she said, moving towards a control panel. "If we can activate this outpost, we might be able to locate the second control point and defend ourselves against the Syndicate." Joshua nodded, taking up a defensive position near the entrance. "Do it. I'll keep watch." As Hope began to interface with the ancient technology, the sound of Syndicate forces grew closer. Time was running out, and the fate of Qatar Prime hung in the balance as they raced to unlock the secrets of the outpost and stay one step ahead of their pursuers. Hope's fingers danced across the ancient controls, her bioluminescence pulsing in sync with the outpost's awakening systems. "I've got it!" she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with triumph. "I can access the location of the second control point from here." Just as Hope began to download the crucial information, a plasma bolt sizzled past Joshua's head, leaving a scorch mark on the wall behind him. "We're out of time," Joshua said, his voice tight with urgency. "We need to move now." Hope nodded, quickly disconnecting from the terminal. As they turned to flee, a familiar voice rang out from the entrance. "Stop right there!" Joshua and Hope froze, recognizing the commanding tone of Zira, the rebel leader who had sent them on this mission. She stood in the doorway, her weapon trained on them, flanked by two other rebels. "Zira?" Hope's voice was filled with confusion. "What are you doing here?" Zira's expression was grim. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you activate the second control point. The risks are too great." Joshua tensed, ready to spring into action. "What are you talking about? We're trying to save the planet." "At what cost?" Zira countered. "The activation could trigger catastrophic seismic events. We need more time to study the system, to find a safer way." Hope stepped forward, her skin glowing with intensity. "There is no more time, Zira. The planet is dying. We have to act now." The standoff was interrupted by the sound of approaching Syndicate forces. Zira glanced over her shoulder, indecision clear on her face. In that moment of distraction, Joshua made his move. He lunged forward, knocking Zira's weapon aside. Hope reacted instantly, using her bioluminescence to create a blinding flash of light that disoriented the other rebels. "Run!" Joshua shouted, grabbing Hope's hand. They sprinted past the stunned group and into the flooded tunnels beyond. Behind them, they could hear Zira shouting orders, her voice mixing with the sounds of the approaching Syndicate troops. As they navigated the treacherous underwater passages, Joshua and Hope knew they faced an impossible choice. The second control point was their only hope of saving Qatar Prime, but activating it could indeed have devastating consequences. Emerging from the water into a vast cavern, they paused to catch their breath. Hope's bioluminescence cast an eerie glow on the ancient stone walls. "We can't let Zira stop us," Hope said, her voice filled with commitment. "But we can't risk harming her, or the other rebels either." Joshua nodded, his mind racing. "Then we split up. I'll stay behind to protect Zira and help her recover from whatever's driving her to act this way. You go on to the second control point." Hope's eyes widened. "Alone? But Joshua, we don't know what I'll face there." "You're the only one who can interface with the Qatarian technology," Joshua said, placing his hands on her shoulders. "You have to do this, Hope. For all of us." Their eyes locked, a moment of unspoken understanding passing between them. Hope nodded, her bioluminescence pulsing with renewed purpose. "Be careful," she whispered, before turning and racing towards the tunnel that would lead her to the second control point. Joshua watched her go, then turned back to face the approaching sounds of conflict. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. Hope sprinted through the winding tunnels, her bioluminescence intensifying with each step. The stress and urgency of the situation caused her skin to glow brighter than ever before, illuminating the ancient passages in a dazzling display of blue-green light. As she ran, Hope's mind raced with possibilities. Why had Zira turned against them? Was there truth to her warnings about the dangers of activating the control point? But deep down, Hope knew they had no choice. The fate of Qatar Prime hung in the balance. Finally, after what felt like hours of navigating the labyrinthine tunnels, Hope emerged into a vast cavern. Her breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The second control point loomed in the center of the chamber, a massive structure of Katarian design. Ancient symbols carved into its surface pulsed with dormant energy, awaiting activation. Hope approached the control panel, her heart pounding with anticipation. As she reached out to interface with the system, Hope suddenly realized a crucial detail. The activation sequence required two individuals with Katarian genetic signatures. Her eyes darted around the chamber, searching for a solution, but she was alone. Hope's mind raced, calculating her options. She couldn't wait for Joshua or anyone else to arrive. With each passing moment, Tar Prime's condition worsened. She had to find a way to activate the control point on her own. Drawing on her advanced knowledge of Tarian technology, Hope began to manipulate the control panel, attempting to bypass the two-person requirement. Her bioluminescence flared as she poured her energy into the task, her fingers dancing across the ancient interface. Suddenly, a loud rumble shook the cavern. Hope's efforts had triggered a security system, and the chamber began to seal itself off. Massive stone doors ground shut, cutting off her escape routes. Realizing she was running out of time, Hope made a desperate decision. She pressed her hands directly against the control panel, using her bioluminescent abilities to interface directly with the ancient technology. The risk was enormous. Such a deep connection could overwhelm her system, causing permanent damage or worse. As Hope's consciousness merged with the control point, her bioluminescence exploded outward, enveloping the entire chamber in a dazzling display of light and energy. The strain on her body intensified, every nerve ending screaming in protest. Through the haze of pain and sensory overload, Hope pushed on, determined to complete the activation sequence. She could feel the immense power of the control point surging through her, threatening to tear her apart. Just as Hope felt she could endure no more, a familiar presence cut through the chaos. Joshua burst into the chamber, followed closely by Zira. They had arrived through a hidden passage, having driven their differences in the face of the greater threat. "Hope!" Joshua's voice barely registered through the roar of energy surrounding her. He rushed to her side, instinctively reaching out to touch her glowing form. As his hand made contact with her skin, something extraordinary happened. Joshua's prolonged exposure to Hope's unique biology over their journey had changed him in ways neither of them had realized. His touch acted as a stabilizing force, grounding Hope's connection to the control panel. Together, their combined energies completed the activation sequence. The second control point roared to life, sending a massive energy pulse through the planet's crust. The pulse interacted with the first control point, creating a partial planetary shield that began to stabilize Qatar Prime's atmosphere and weather patterns. As the energy pulse subsided, Hope collapsed, her bioluminescence fading to a faint flicker. Joshua caught her, cradling her in his arms. The intimate contact between them intensified, their bodies resonating with shared energy from the activation process. Zira watched in amazement, her earlier doubts forgotten in the face of what she had just witnessed. As the cavern trembled with the aftermath of the activation, she stepped forward, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "We need to get out of here," Zira said urgently. "The activation has triggered seismic activity. This entire chamber could collapse at any moment." Joshua nodded, lifting Hope's weakened form. As they turned to leave, Zira's eyes widened in realization. "Wait," she said, her voice filled with a new understanding. "The way you two connected, it might be the key to fully activating the planetary shield. The ancient Qatarians designed the system to require a deep bond between individuals, a safeguard to ensure only those with the planet's best interests at heart could activate it." Before they could process this information, a violent tremor shook the cavern. Fissures began to open in the floor, releasing streams of superheated gases and lava. "We need to move now," Zira shouted, leading the way towards a hidden transport pod she had discovered. As they reached the pod, a massive tremor caused a section of the cavern ceiling to collapse, separating Zira from Joshua and Hope. Debris rained down, creating an impassable barrier. Zira, realizing the pod could only carry two, made a split-second decision. She used her genetic signature to activate the pod's launch sequence, sealing Joshua and Hope inside. "Complete the mission," Zira called out as the pod's door sealed shut. Save our world! The pod blasted out of the collapsing cavern through an ancient escape tunnel, leaving Zira behind. As they rocketed towards the surface, Joshua tended to Hope, whose bioluminescence flickered weakly. The close confines of the pod forced them into intimate proximity, their bodies pressed together as Joshua tried to stabilize Hope's condition. Suddenly, the pod burst through the surface, revealing a dramatically transformed landscape. The partial planetary shield shimmered in the sky, holding back the worst of the cosmic radiation. However, the shield was incomplete, and dangerous energy flares still penetrated the atmosphere in places. Joshua and Hope exited the pod, surveying their surroundings. In the distance, they spotted the location of the third and final control point, a massive Catarian structure atop a newly formed mountain range. Between them and their goal lay a treacherous landscape of active volcanoes, unstable ground, and pockets of extreme weather. As Hope regained her strength, she and Joshua exchanged a look of grit. Their journey had forged a deep bond between them, one that might be the key to fully activating the planetary shield and saving Tar Prime. With the Syndicate forces surely regrouping and the planet still in peril, Joshua and Hope set off towards the final control point. Their bodies hummed with shared energy, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead in their quest to save their world. They shared a determined look, then set off towards the towering mountain range that loomed in the distance. The journey proved treacherous from the start. The partially activated planetary shield created an unstable environment with pockets of extreme weather scattered across the landscape. Energy flares pierced through gaps in the shield, scorching the ground where they touched down. Hope's bioluminescence flickered erratically as they navigated the hazardous terrain. Joshua kept a watchful eye on her, noting how the activation of the second control point had taken its toll. "How are you holding up?" he asked as they paused to catch their breath. Hope's skin pulsed with a soft blue glow. "I'll manage. We can't stop now." They pressed on, their bond growing stronger with each obstacle they overcame. As they approached a field of geothermal vents, the air grew thick with sulfurous fumes. Hope's bioluminescence suddenly intensified, reacting to the mineral-rich vapors. To their surprise, a protective barrier formed around them, shimmering with a pale blue light. Joshua reached out, his hand meeting resistance where the barrier formed. "Incredible," he breathed, "your body's adapting to the environment." Hope nodded, her expression a mix of wonder and strain. "It's allowing us to pass through, but I can feel the toll it's taking." They moved swiftly through the field of vents, the corrosive gases held at bay by Hope's luminescent shield. As they cleared the area, Hope stumbled, her glow dimming momentarily. Joshua caught her, supporting her weight. "We need to rest," he insisted, guiding her towards a rocky outcropping. Hope shook her head. "We can't afford to stop. The final control point won't do us any good if you collapse before we reach it," Joshua countered. As they climbed higher into the mountain range, the air grew thin and bitterly cold. Joshua's survival training kicked in, and he quickly fashioned a shelter in the lee of a massive boulder. The space was cramped, forcing them to press close together for warmth. In the confined space, Hope's bioluminescence cast a soft, intimate glow. Joshua became acutely aware of her proximity, the warmth of her skin, the rhythm of her breathing. Her light pulsed in time with their heartbeats, creating a hypnotic effect. "Joshua," Hope whispered, her eyes meeting his. "I've never felt a connection like this before." He nodded, understanding the depth of what she meant. Their shared experiences, the unique way their biologies interacted, it all culminated in something profound and undeniable. As dawn broke, they continued their ascent. The thin air and steep terrain pushed them to their limits. Hope's bioluminescence flickered weakly, her energy reserves depleting rapidly. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, they stumbled upon an ancient structure built into the mountainside. Catarian symbols adorned the entrance, pulsing faintly in response to Hope's presence. "An outpost," Hope breathed, her eyes wide with excitement. "There might be supplies inside." They entered cautiously, finding the interior remarkably well preserved. As they explored, they discovered a cache of advanced technology, including 2 sleek, form-fitting suits. Hope ran her hand over the material, her bioluminescence reacting to its surface. "These are designed for extreme environments," she explained, "but there's something unique about them." As they donned the suits, they realized the garments were meant to be worn by bonded pairs. The suits required constant physical contact to function properly, linking Hope and Joshua in a way that felt both alien and strangely natural. Emerging from the outpost, they found their physical abilities enhanced by the suits. They scaled near vertical cliffs with ease, leapt across chasms that would have been impossible to traverse before. Their movements became perfectly synchronized, each anticipating the other's actions without a word spoken. As they neared the summit, a familiar voice called out to them, "Hope! Joshua!" They turned to see Cora, the Qatarian rebel they had encountered earlier, approaching with a small group of fighters. Her expression was grim as she reached them. "We've got trouble," Cora said. "Syndicate forces are approaching from the other side of the mountain. They're led by Zarek." Hope's face paled at the mention of her uncle's name. Joshua squeezed her hand reassuringly. Cora continued, "We'll hold them off as long as we can. You two need to reach the control point." With renewed urgency, Hope and Joshua made their final push to the summit. The massive crystalline structure housing the third control point came into view, its surface shimmering with latent energy. As they approached, an invisible barrier repelled them, crackling with bioenergetic feedback. Hope studied the field, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's keyed to a specific signature," she realized, "one that can only be produced by two beings with a deep connection." Joshua met her gaze, understanding dawning between them. Without a word, they removed their protective suits, exposing themselves to the harsh environment. As the biting cold hit them, Hope's bioluminescence flared, enveloping them both in a cocoon of warmth and energy. They held each other close, their bodies resonating with shared energy. The bioenergetic field around them intensified, matching the frequency of the control point's energy field. The crystalline structure began to respond, its surface rippling with patterns of light that mirrored Hope's bioluminescence. As their connection deepened, the barrier dissipated. The crystalline structure opened, revealing the ancient Qatarian technology within. Hope guided Joshua through the activation process, their movements in perfect harmony as they interfaced with the control panels. Energy surged through the structure, connecting with the other two control points across the planet. A massive pulse radiated outward, completing the planetary shield. A shimmering dome of energy enveloped Qatar Prime, stabilizing the atmosphere and neutralizing the cosmic radiation threat. As the shield fully formed, a shockwave of energy washed over Hope and Joshua. Hope gasped, her body arching as the energy transformed her, permanently altering her physiology to be more compatible with Joshua's human form. Their moment of triumph was short-lived. The sound of weapons fire echoed from below, growing closer with each passing second. Zarek and his syndicate forces had breached the summit's defenses. Hope and Joshua found themselves trapped between the approaching syndicate troops and the edge of a steep cliff. Below them, the transformed landscape of Qatar Prime stretched out, a testament to what they had accomplished and what they still stood to lose. As Cora and her rebels engaged the syndicate forces in fierce combat, Hope and Joshua exchanged a look of dedication. Their bodies still hummed with shared energy, their bond stronger than ever. "Whatever happens," Hope said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, "we face it together." Joshua nodded, his hand finding hers. Together. They turned to face the oncoming threat, the fate of two worlds hanging in the balance as they prepared for their final stand against Zarek and the Syndicate. Syndicate forces. Joshua's mind raced, calculating their odds. His eyes darted across the summit, searching for any advantage. Suddenly, he spotted it. A sleek Qatarian glider perched precariously on the cliff's edge, its metallic surface glinting in the harsh light. He squeezed Hope's hand, their shared energy pulsing between them. Without a word, she understood. They sprinted towards the ancient vehicle, their movements perfectly synchronized. Zarek's voice cut through the chaos. "Stop them!" Energy blasts sizzled past, scorching the ground at their heels. Hope's bioluminescence flared instinctively, enveloping them in a protective cocoon of light. The air crackled with each impact against her shield, but it held. They reached the glider, its surface humming to life at Hope's touch. Joshua's hands found the controls as if guided by an unseen force. With a shared nod, they leapt off the cliff's edge. For a heart-stopping moment, they plummeted. Then the glider's wings snapped open, catching the turbulent air. They soared away from the battle, the wind whipping past them. Their respite was short-lived. The whine of engines pierced the air as Zarek and his elite guard gave chase in sleek black aircraft. The aerial pursuit began in earnest, weaving through jagged mountain peaks and swirling energy flares from the newly formed planetary shield. Joshua's hands danced over the controls, coaxing impossible maneuvers from the ancient glider. Hope placed her palms on the craft's surface, her bioluminescence pulsing as she interfaced with the Tarian technology. The glider responded, its speed and agility increasing beyond its original capabilities. A bolt of energy clipped their wing, sending them into a wild spin. Joshua gritted his teeth, wrestling for control. "Hope, we need something more." Hope's eyes gleamed with newfound understanding. She reached out not just to the glider, but to the very air around them. The atmosphere rippled, localized storm fronts materializing in their wake. Joshua grinned, instantly grasping her strategy. He banked hard, leading their pursuers into a gauntlet of swirling winds and pocket lightning storms. Two syndicate craft collided in the chaos, erupting into fireballs against the mountainside. They emerged from a bank of clouds to find a massive gorge stretching before them. Hope's triumphant smile faded as she saw Zarek's ship closing in, energy weapons charging for a killing blow. The shot connected, tearing through their right wing. Alarms blared as they lost altitude, spiraling towards the raging river below. Joshua fought the controls, aiming for the water's surface. "Hope, now!" he shouted. In the final seconds before impact, Hope encased them both in a shimmering sphere of bioluminescent energy. They hit the water with bone-jarring force, plunging beneath the surface. The river's fierce current swept them along, tumbling through submerged caverns. Hope's protective bubble held, allowing them to breathe as they were buffeted against rocks and drawn ever deeper into the planet's depths. Gradually, the water's rage subsided. They found themselves drifting through vast underground chambers, their passage illuminated by Hope's ethereal glow. Ancient murals adorned the walls, depicting scenes from Qatar Prime's long-forgotten past. Hope gasped, her eyes wide with wonder. "Joshua, look! The shield! It's not just for protection. It's a beacon, a way to communicate with other advanced civilizations across the cosmos." Before Joshua could respond, they were swept into a final tunnel. Light glimmered ahead, growing brighter until they burst free of the underground river's grasp. They emerged into a hidden valley, a lush oasis nestled within the mountains. At its center stood a colossal structure, its crystalline spires reaching towards the sky. As they approached, panels shifted and realigned, responding to their presence. "The true heart of the shield system," Hope whispered in awe. They entered the massive control center, surrounded by technology beyond their wildest imaginings. A holographic message flickered to life, the image of an ancient Tarian filling the chamber. "Greetings, children of Qatar Prime," the figure intoned. "If you are witnessing this message, then you have realized the true potential that lies dormant within you. The power of connection, not just between individuals, but between species." The hologram continued, revealing the shield's greater purpose: to nurture bonds like the one Hope and Joshua shared, preparing Qatar Prime to join a vast galactic community. As the message faded, alarms blared throughout the structure. Hope's hands flew over a control panel, bringing up external view screens. Zarek and his remaining forces had discovered the valley, their weapons primed for a final assault. Joshua and Hope exchanged a determined look. This was where they would make their stand, with the future of Tar Prime hanging in the balance. Hope's fingers danced across the controls, her bioluminescence pulsing in time with the structure's energy field. Joshua placed his hands over hers, their combined energy flowing into the ancient systems. The effect was immediate and planet-wide. Qatarian technology, dormant for millennia, surged to life. A web of energy spread across Qatar Prime, seeking out and neutralizing syndicate weapons and vehicles. As Zarek and his troops entered the valley, their fearsome arsenal fell silent. Confusion and panic spread through their ranks as they found themselves powerless. The sound of energy weapons filled the air once more, but this time it was Cora and her rebels, having tracked the path of destruction left by the aerial chase. They quickly surrounded the disarmed syndicate forces. Zarek, his plans crumbling around him, locked eyes with Hope. With a snarl of rage, he charged towards her, a vibro knife clutched in his hand. Joshua moved without thinking, intercepting Zarek's attack. Their bodies collided, grappling for control of the blade. Hope's energy flowed through Joshua, guiding his movements. In a fluid sequence of strikes, Joshua disarmed Zarek, sending the syndicate leader crashing to the ground. As Cora's rebels secured the last of the syndicate forces, Hope stepped forward. She placed her hand on a central control pillar, and her voice echoed across the planet through the shield's communication network. "People of Tar Prime," she began, her voice strong and clear. "The time has come for truth, for healing, and for a new beginning." Her words spread across the planet, telling the true history of their world and the shield's greater purpose. She spoke of the potential for cooperation, not just among Terrians, but with other species, like humans. The response was overwhelming. Across Tar Prime, weapons were laid down. The sight of Hope and Joshua, standing united, became a powerful symbol of the planet's future. As the sun set on this momentous day, Joshua and Hope stood at the entrance to the hidden valley. The planetary shield shimmered overhead, no longer a barrier, but a bridge to the stars. Hope's bioluminescence pulsed softly, in perfect sync with Joshua's heartbeat. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice filled with equal parts excitement and uncertainty. Joshua smiled, taking her hand in his. "Now," he said, gazing out at the transformed landscape of Tar Prime, "we build something new, together." The valley below bustled with activity as Qatarians and humans worked side by side, the first steps towards a shared future. And high above, beyond the shimmering shield, the first curious responses to Qatar Prime's cosmic beacon began to appear in the night sky.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.